So, I want to bring up our first guest speaker today. He's a truly remarkable man, and before I call him on stage, I want to tell you a little bit about this guy. So, Sonny Aswani, and you can read his formal bio on the app, right? You'll see his bio there. But I'm not going to read the formal bio because I've known Sonny for about 18 years. And Sonny came to Estonia in the mid-90s when it had just become a new country liberated from the Soviet Union. And he saw a land of opportunity. And in a short amount of time, from the age of 27 to the age of 33, Sonny started so many different and unique entrepreneurial activities in Estonia that by the time he was around 30 years old, get this, and I kid you not, he was responsible for 1% of the entire GDP of the country. And the president of Estonia honored him, and he became the first non-Estonian born citizen of Estonia. He got honorary citizenship. So his story is crazy inspiring. He's an incredibly funny guy, very humble, and loves to share, and just has the most amazing stories. So I wanted to invite Sonny Aswani on stage for a special 20-minute interview.
Thank you, Vishen.
Sonny, before we start, would you like to say anything to the audience here?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you my tagline. My tagline is, I love you, baby.
And so you've had like this incredible fascination with Estonia, but you just come here and you've created so many different businesses and you've innovated in so many ways. First, we'd love to get a bit of your story. How did you end up becoming the first foreign honorary citizen of Estonia, of being able to be responsible for 1% of an entire country's GDP?
Yeah. Let me share with you my journey. So, oddly enough, I come from Java. I was born in Java in Indonesia. And I then moved on, so Indian origin, born in Java, moved on to Malaysia when we were 6 years old, because education was a lot better in Malaysia because of the British system. But to make a long story short, I then went on to study in England, where I had a great experience, and I had to work my way through my education by working in Pizza Hut, making pizzas. I then moved on to back to Singapore, and then I moved to India. And when I was in India, I was in my early 20s, I used to work very, very hard, and I knew how important it was that I worked my way through making pizzas to pay for my education, right? So I went to India, worked very hard, but no matter how hard I worked, nothing happened for me. Everything just didn't fall into places. So what do? I go in, being an Indian, I go and see an astrologer. And believe it or not, when I went to see the astrologer, he asked me where I was born and the exact time and minute I was born. So I called my mom up and said, Mom, do you know where I was, what time I was born? Luckily, she had this. So I wrote it in a piece of paper. I gave it to the astrologer. The astrologer goes into a room. 20 minutes later, he comes on and he says, Sonny, I know what the problem is. So I said, what's the problem? He said, you're living in the wrong country. What do you mean I'm living in the wrong country? I'm Indian. I'm supposed to live here. He says, no, you're living in the wrong country. I said, but why? He said, you need to go and live in a country where it's cold. That's what he said. He said, this climate is too warm for you. You need to go and live in a cold country. I said, okay. 2 weeks later, and this is the time when between Russia and India, they had what was called the rupee-ruble account balancing. They had to have a trade balance between the two. And Russia was supplying all kinds of, submarines and steel plants and everything to India. But India didn't have too much to supply, so they were supplying consumer goods. 2 weeks later, I took a flight. And I took a flight, and I recalled, at the time when I was studying in England, it was a cold country, and no matter how hard my conditions, how difficult my conditions were, I made it through. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to catch a flight, and I'm going to Moscow. So I, true enough, go to Moscow, 2 luggage, 1 luggage of my clothes, 1 luggage of all kinds of consumer goods and hands. I went to Moscow, went into the hotel, stayed there for 2 days, and I walked into the shops. All the shops I walked into, the shelves were empty. And I thought, oh my God, what a great opportunity. I'm going to fill them all up. And that's what I chose to do. And so I took a flight. I went back to Singapore. And instead of going back to India, I went to Singapore. I said, I found my land of opportunity. I'm going to make my bucks here in Russia. Went to my family and I said, lend me $250,000 and I'm going to buy all kinds of goods and I'm going to fill up the stores in Moscow. As it happened, the business grew to such an extent. I went to Moscow and I did. I filled up all the stores. The first shop that I filled up was called Magazine Moscow. And I had all my goods over there. And the business became so big that I needed to relocate my logistics, because what happened was I was shipping goods from Indonesia, Malaysia, and everything to St. Petersburg. But St. Petersburg wasn't a nice free port. So goods used to get stuck in the port for weeks. And I needed to find a new place to relocate my logistics business. And so that's how Vish and I came to Estonia.
So when you came to Estonia, what happened?
Oddly enough, when I came to Estonia, it was the Malaysian ambassador. It was the Malaysian ambassador in Russia. And he told me, and I wanted to relocate the logistics business. And he said, Sonny, come to Estonia. And I said, oh, sorry, where? He said, Tallinn, Estonia. I said, are you kidding me? Population of 1.38 million on Earth, and you want me to come to Estonia? I said, no, forget it. First thing I did was I took a flight and I went to Odessa. I went to Ukraine because there was a far larger market in Ukraine, right? And as much as I tried to do business over there, it didn't work. Eventually, one day, he brought me here to Estonia. He said, I'm going to celebrate Malaysia's Independence Day, and I'm going to celebrate it in Estonia, so you have to come here. So this was back in 1994. 1994, he organized what was supposed to be a trade delegation. So I came in 2 days before that to go and see the Freeport warehousing over here. And I was very impressed with what I saw. And on the day of the Independence Day, and he told me he was going to be bringing a trade delegation. So I walk into the Chamber of Commerce in Estonia on the supposedly day. And as I walk in over there, there was a big announcement. There's a Malaysian trade delegation that's coming over here to celebrate Malaysia's Independence Day. And guess what happened? On that particular day, there was, guess how many people there were in the trade delegation? 1. And I wasn't even Malaysian. I was Singaporean. So that's what the neighboring countries did. So that's how I ended up over here. It was because of the Malaysian ambassador.
Now you pulled off many brilliant business endeavors in Estonia. And one of the reasons I wanted to put Sonny on stage is because when you see how this guy thinks, it kind of shows you how we can operate in that way, right? So you started textile mills, you started the cigar bar in Tallinn, right? So if you guys are near the town square and you see a cigar bar, that's his. And you also started gyms, so cigars to, ruin health, and then gyms to improve health, balances out the force. But I think one of your most audacious endeavors was you bought the KGB building. So there's this building, a KGB building in Tallinn, and it's a building that Estonians don't have a good feeling about, because this was where the KGB, when the Soviets invaded Tallinn, they shipped out 300,000 people to Siberia, to the gulags, right? But you changed that. Tell us about that story.
Okay, the KGB building is, so there was this building, it was known as the former KGB building. It had a history in the past. And back in 2010, it was when the crisis happened. They put it up for auction, and I chose to buy it. And when I bought it, they said, Sonny, you must be crazy. This building carries a lot of history, negativity behind it. And I said, yes, but I'm going to change that. This is the most majestic building in town. And that's why when the Soviet Union occupied Estonia, they took over this building, simply because it was the most majestic building. And it was actually built by a British naval officer. It was made to reside elite naval officers here. And this building was originally built in 1913, I believe. So he started the project in 1907. He completed it in 1913. Soviets occupied it. the history behind it was so pleasant. But I was so convinced that this was such a beautiful building, and I had to convert it. So what I did was I bought the building, and I went to the banks, and I said, give me money to renovate. And they said, no money for this building. And I said, no problem. I found ways to raise money. I renovated the building. And finally, when I did, that building was given the award of being the most prestigious residential building in Tallinn. Yeah.
Many of you might pass by this building as you walk through the old town. Sonny,
you need to be crazy every now and then to do magical things here.
And that's a really good message. We should get that on a t-shirt. You have to be crazy every now and then to do magical things. So speaking of that, if you could go back to meet your 18-year-old self and whisper some advice in that younger version of years, what would you advise that person?
So the advice I would give is listen to your heart. Often you have to listen to your brain, but more important, listen to your heart. It's the heart that leads the way. It's the heart that will show you the success.
When you're making these business decisions, because you've taken a lot of gambles, right?
Yeah. I have.
How are you doing that? Are you listening to your heart? Is it a logical process? Are you speaking with a team of advisors? Explain how you think.
For me, it's never been about logic. It's always been about what I feel in my heart and what I feel in my gut. When I hire people, I hire based on what I feel in my gut. Never based on logic. Never works. And I have to say, I have achieved what I have here today because I have an outstanding number of people working for me. And they are the ones who have created all of this for me. And all of this I've done through my gut and my heart.
How many people do you have working for you in Estonia right now, for your companies?
Yeah, in Estonia today I have about 500 people, but globally I have 10,000.
Well, now, one of the unique projects that you have, which I think is really interesting, is instant noodles.
Yeah, instant noodles. So one of our business is that, and this is globalization, right? It took a bunch of Indians, took a product from Indonesia called Indomie, and we actually sell it today in Africa. So my brother, another crazy one in the family, decided that he would want to try and find a way to feed Africans for 10 cents per meal. Because an average African earns about $1 a day in those days. No? Today maybe $2 a day. But he was so convinced that he had to find a way to sell, to provide a meal for less than 10 cents a meal. So what he did was, because we grew up in Indonesia, in Java, and as kids we grew up eating instant noodles. So he decided to import instant noodles from Indonesia to Nigeria. So in one container of, a 20-foot container, there are about 144,000 packets of noodles, which is, if you think about it, not too large. Brings it to Nigeria, tries to sell noodles to Africans. Guess what happened? Nobody bought it. So what he decided to do was, he says, look, one of the reasons they don't buy it is because they don't know what it tastes like. And he had a problem because when he put the goods in the warehouse, the bottom part of all the cartons were being eaten by rats. So he decided that he would begin to give it away. So he went on the streets, he put up stalls, put a number of stalls, and started to do sampling of noodles. And he began to give it away for free. Then he told the family, you better bring in another container. He said, are you crazy? You haven't even sold your first container and you want to bring a second one? He said, yeah, they will. Because when they taste it, they like it, they will buy it. I said, okay. And the problem is the shipment of goods from Indonesia to Nigeria took 30 days. So he said, I can't keep them waiting for 30 days. So you better bring another container. But he was so convinced that if they try the noodles, they like it, they will buy it. And they did. So bottom part's all eaten by rats. Top part, he gave it for free sampling. By the time the next container came, he sold it. And he began to sell it container by container. And his business grew so big that he eventually bought out Nestle, Maggi noodles. He bought them out. That's what he did. And today, believe it or not, he produces 8 million packets of noodles per day. But he had the conviction because he didn't listen to logic. He listened to his heart and his gut.
What is going on with your family? How are your parents producing these like sons who go out there and just like conquer countries? And so what impresses me is that you're not even Estonian or Russian. Your brother is not even Nigerian. Yet you guys go there and build these business empires.
Yeah, these things happen, right?
No, but what's that mental model? I'm trying to understand what's going on in your head that makes you different.
I don't know. I mean, my role,
I know you're crazy, but can you define that craziness?
My mom was crazy. And she's my role model, complete role model. She went to do things out of her way, started in her life to do things, even when she was young, did things completely differently. But role model, so why crazy mom? What complete role model?
So I have two last questions for you. The first question is, what was the most audacious thing or the funniest thing, the best story you have where you followed your heart and created something fascinating?
Oh, there have been many visions. There have been quite a few. But let me share with you a story about Estonia, Estonia Day. So when I first came here, I was convinced that I needed to relocate my logistics business from Russia. I needed to relocate it to Estonia. And I believed that this would be the right place to do. And at that particular point of time, and this is what Estonia has done great, I had the main owner of my company, my chairman. He was flying in from the US. He went to London. He was in London for a while, and I called him and I said, look, I discovered this great country. He said, what is it? I said, it's called Estonia. He said, what's so great about it? I said, everything here is so great. You have to come here, let's invest over here. And those days, it was 1994, Estonia was going through a process called privatization. So during this process of privatization, the state, eventually when Estonia became independent, the state began to own all the industries. But the state didn't want to be in the business of running businesses, right? So they wanted to go out and sell the companies. And they went through a process called privatization. And I needed to convince my chairman to come over here. He was in London on transit, and he says, but Sonny, if I'm going to come over here, I need to get a visa. I said, yeah, I'll try and make sure you get a visa. So what happened was, I went to in those days it was called the privatization agency. I went there and I told them, I need to get a visa for my chairman. He said, what passport does he hold? I said, he holds an Indonesian passport. He says, why he should come here? I said, because he will make a difference. And he says, when do you need the visa? I said, I need it today. He says, are you crazy? I said, yes. So I went up to the privatization agency. Long story short, this gentleman was taken to the embassy, Estonian embassy in London. He walked in over there. The lady greeted this man at the door, took the passport, and said, the ambassador is waiting for you upstairs to have tea with you. So my chairman gives the passport, those days you had to give a photograph, give the photograph, sign the form. They filled in the forms, by the way. He didn't have to fill in the forms. Went up, ambassador hosted him for tea for 20 minutes, came up, gave him the passport and said, here's your Estonian visa. Now, remember why that's important. My chairman had his first impression of Estonia even before he set foot in the country. He had his first impression and he said, Sonny, wow, I got a visa, everything in 20 minutes, unbelievable. And you know what this gentleman did? The moment he stepped over here and over the last 20 odd years, because of that one incident, first impression incident, he has invested more than 200 million euros in this country. One impression, before he set foot in the country. So that's what happened.
So the final question, Sonny, that's an amazing story, but the final question is, by the time you were 33, you were responsible for 1% of the GDP of Estonia. But then in 2003, you were telling me you lost everything.
Lost everything.
And you were $220 million in debt.
Yeah.
Right? So notice the rise and the fall.
Yeah.
How did you climb out of that hole? Because a lot of people here have been there.
Okay. So when I was about in my early 30s, I had businesses not just in Estonia. Estonia business was just a small part of it. The bigger business was actually in Latvia and Lithuania. Again, privatization process. I went crazy and I thought I could buy all of these companies cheap and turn them around. But, and at one particular point, early 30s, I was doing a turnover of $1 million every working day. And I was in my early 30s. But by the time, the year 2000, we all went bust, went completely broke, and I couldn't afford anything. Couldn't afford anything to the extent I couldn't even have a credit card. But I had to pick myself up. So what we did was we selectively sold the companies that we didn't believe in. The ones that I was told to buy and I didn't believe in it, decided to sell it. But the one thing that made a big difference, that made a huge difference to me, was the team that I had. I had such a great team. And this was the team that I built from my heart and my gut, not from my head. I was told to hire people, and I didn't hire them because I felt their CV was too impressive. I hired ordinary people. I believed that I would hire ordinary people who would make extraordinary things happen. And that's exactly what happened. This was the team that I have, and they all still work for me. 23 years, and they're all still working for me today.
That's amazing. So, before we wrap up, do you have any closing words for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, many of you are not from Estonia, right? And if you think and you begin to wonder that this is, Estonia is a cold country, cold climate, I should perhaps bring my sweater, my scarves, my hats, my boots and everything. And I tell them, forget all of that. If you're going to come to Estonia, there's one item you have to carry with you. They said, what is it? I said, you've got to bring your sunglasses. I said, what? Sunglasses? And I said, yeah. Because the future here is so bright, you're going to need them.
That's phenomenal. Thank you, Sonny.
Sure.
It was amazing having you on stage.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thanks.